All right, let's just dive right in with a massive question. Are the schools we have today actually preparing our kids for the world of tomorrow? It's a question that's right at the heart of this huge debate about education. Are we giving a new generation the tools they're really going to need? Or are we just teaching them skills for a world that, frankly, doesn't exist anymore?
And look, this isn't just some abstract theoretical debate. This is the day-to-day reality for teachers who are on the front lines. I mean, when someone like the 2024 Nevada Teacher of the Year comes out and says, hey, the skills our learners need now are totally different, well, that's a huge signal, right? It tells you the ground is already shifted right under our feet.
Okay, so if we're going to figure out where we need to go, we first have to understand why the old map is, well, it's pretty much useless now. Let's take a quick look back at how long we've actually been talking about this.
Now, you might think all this panic is a pretty new thing, but nope. This timeline shows this has been a slow burn for, get this, over 40 years. Seriously, way back in 1983, this huge report, A Nation at Risk, basically sounded the first alarm. Then fast forward to 2000, and you've got Fortune 500 companies saying, we need people who can work in teams and solve problems, not just memorize stuff. A few years later, 2006, another survey confirms it. Employers are practically begging for people with communication and critical thinking skills. So yeah, we've been having this conversation for a long time, but that gap, it's still there.
All right, so if the old skills just aren't cutting it anymore, what are the skills that actually matter today? Well, the answer usually gets bundled up into this one key phrase, 21st century skills.
So what does that even mean, right? 21st century skills. It sounds kind of buzzy, but really it's all about this big shift. It's less about what you know, the facts you can memorize, and it's way more about what you can do with what you know. We're talking about moving away from just memorizing dates and formulas and moving towards mastering things like analyzing information, solving really messy problems, and, crucially, working well with other people.
And this slide, I think, just lays it out so perfectly. The old school foundation, right? It was all about the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Super important for sure, but just not enough anymore. The new foundation, that's the 4 C's. It's all about questions like, can you think critically when you hit a tough problem? Can you actually communicate your ideas so people get it? Can you work together with a team? And can you bring some creativity to the table? These are the new benchmarks for success.
Okay, so we know what the goal is, building up those 4C skills. But that leads to the next logical question. How in the world do you actually teach that? Well, one of the most exciting and powerful answers out there is a method called project-based learning. You'll hear it called PBL.
The idea behind PBL is actually pretty simple, but it's also kind of profound. Instead of sitting there passively listening to a lecture, students get to dive in and tackle a real-world problem. They're not working alone, they're working in teams. They're doing their own research, asking their own questions, and at the end, they create something real and tangible, like a product or a presentation, some kind of solution. And then they share it. It's the ultimate learning by doing, not just learning by listening.
Now, that all sounds great in theory, doesn't it? But what does this actually look like in a real classroom? Let's get to the fun part and check out some amazing examples from teachers who are doing this right now.
I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. How cool is this? In one class, you've got students debating whether zombies have constitutional rights. Yeah, you heard me, zombies. And through that, they're learning about biology and civics. In another, they're programming robots to go on a road trip across a giant floor map of the US. Or how about this? They're researching local history, publishing an actual photojournalism book, and even holding a book signing. This is so far beyond a worksheet, right? These are real, memorable experiences that are built from the ground up to teach those core skills.
Okay, so these projects sound incredibly fun, right? Super engaging. But that brings us to maybe the most important question we have to ask. Does it actually work? I mean, beyond being fun, does this stuff really improve the skills we're trying to build?
And this is the point where we need to move past just cool stories and anecdotes. We need to look at the hard data. Is there any solid scientific proof that project-based learning actually makes a difference for things like creativity and critical thinking?
So to get that proof, researchers did something really smart. They didn't just rely on one single study. They did what's called a meta-analysis. Basically, it's a study of studies. They gathered up a whole bunch of different high-quality studies on the topic and analyzed all of their results together. This gives you a much more reliable picture of what's really going on.
So what did they find when they looked at creativity? Honestly, the result is kind of staggering. In science, they measured the impact of something with a number called an effect size. Now, just for context, an effect size of 0.8 is considered huge, okay? So what did they find here? The effect size was 3.888. Let me say that again, 3.888. That is off the charts. It's not just big, it's an absolutely massive, undeniable link between PBL and a student's creativity.
And what about critical thinking? Did it work for that too? Yep. Another massive review looked at 23 different studies and found a really solid effect size of 0.64. Now again, for context, in education research, anything over 0.4 is a big deal. It means it's having a real, meaningful impact. So the evidence here is just super strong. This isn't just a fluke. The data is clear. This method really delivers.
And this chart here, it's called a forest plot, and it's a great way to see just how consistent these findings are. So see that vertical line right down the middle? Think of that as zero effect. Now, each one of those little horizontal lines represents an individual study. And what do you see? Almost every single one of them is way over on the right side. That means study after study after study found a positive result. It proves this isn't some random one-off finding. It is a reliable, repeatable pattern. PBL boosts creativity. Okay, let's take a breath. So we know the skills kids need, and we have a teaching method that is proven by data to work. So what's next? What does all this mean for the future of learning? Well, it means we have to start thinking way bigger than just the four walls of a single classroom.
Because the ultimate goal here isn't just to tweak a few lesson plans. It's to build what experts are calling an ecosystem of learning. And that's a fancy way of saying a system where it's not just schools doing the teaching. It's schools and local businesses and community groups and parents, everybody working together to create these amazing real-world learning opportunities.
And this isn't just a pipe dream either. It's actually happening. Just look at Nevada. They literally brought everyone to the table, educators, business leaders, community members, and together they created something called the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. It's basically their shared roadmap for the skills every student in the state needs. It's a perfect real-world example of a whole community getting together and designing its own future for education.
And all of this brings us right back to where we started. The evidence is pretty compelling, and the path forward is definitely getting clearer. The real challenge now, it seems, isn't just about teaching subjects anymore, just covering math or history. It's about developing learners who are agile, who are creative, who are collaborative, people who are genuinely prepared to tackle the problems of the future, whatever those problems turn out to be.